So here we are. Today I'm going to be talking about actually creating your initial API project. Now, if you haven't seen the previous video, which kind of goes through a run through of the application partially developed so you can get an idea of what we're doing, I'd recommend go viewing that. It's in the playlist that this video is in, and it's the first video before it. It's a really great introduction. But in this video, I'm going to be actually covering just building the basic project. Now, the premise here is I want to build an API interface that you can build to teach you the basic skills. I'm not trying to build a microservice architecture. I'm not trying to do anything extremely exotic. I will be following some techniques that will allow this to be microserviced in the future, but that's not the goal or the target for this particular tutorial. The goal here is to teach you the basics. I'm going to be going a little bit deeper into the different interfaces and what they do and how they act in this once we've built the basic project. But once again, remember that we're just doing basic. And what we're going to do in further videos going forward is we are actually going to go and modify the project, put all the bits and pieces we want into it, and use best practices to make something that will resemble enterprise code in the long run, but not be to that level. Because again, I'm thinking about you as a developer who has just got basic C# skills, and that's where we're going to start. So let's get started here. So we're going to create a new project here, and I am going to be creating a basic ASP.NET Core Web API. Now, it could be version 6, version 8. I don't recommend going anything older than version 6 because it's just going to confuse you and cause problems. So make sure that you actually have all the bits and pieces for the Visual Studio 2022. I'm just using community version here, as well as the .NET. I'd recommend the .NET 8 library, and make sure you have that installed. You can just do a search on the Microsoft site and pull that down. I'm not going to go through all those extra bits and pieces, but I'm assuming you have them. Okay, if you don't have this in your list, because this is a recent template that I've built, you'll find it if you do a search for API in here. It'll shortchange the list down, and it's the one right on top here, ASP.NET Core. Now there's another one here. There's the native AOT. I'm not bothering with that. And I believe that there is another one here for the older version of, yeah, here we go. Model View Controller. This is an older technology. It's just as valid. A lot of the format's the same, but that's not what I'm going to be using. And there was one more here. I think it might be this basic. No, it's core. So yeah, that's what we're going to stick to. But this is what we're looking for here. So we're going to say next. Okay, basic API example, I'm going to call it. I'm going to say next. Okay, and like I said, you can use multiple versions, but I'm going to be using .NET 8 or .NET 8. I'm going to have no authentication. Again, I'm trying to simplify this as much as possible. I am going to configure it for HTTPS. Basically, the idea behind that is most websites use the secure sockets layer, and we're providing that. I am not going to worry about container support. This is a Docker thing. Again, I'm not worried about that. Open API support is going to be checked. This might be checked for you. Do not use top-level statements. I've unchecked it to make it as friendly as possible. Use controllers, and I have unchecked enlist in .NET Aspire orchestration. These are things we just don't need right now. So if you configure your project just like this, you're going to be on the same page as me. So I'm going to create it. Okay, so here we go. Sorry, my Visual Studio is taking some time. Went and checked to see if I could do an upgrade in the middle of a tutorial, and I'm not going to do it right now. So this is what we have. If we look in here very quickly, though, this is very, very basic, as I mentioned earlier. The starting place for all .NET Core programs is program.cs. Okay, we'll see here. Basically what it does is it builds our controllers up. It builds what's called Swagger. Now, Swagger is your friend. That is the graphical front end. It is part of the basic template that comes with this particular project. And it's designed that Swagger will only display if you're in development mode. If you don't understand what that means, don't worry about it. Basically, this is what you're going to be using. This here is the HTTPS redirection. This is going to force everything to use that secure sockets, as I mentioned. Even though we don't have authorization enabled, it's enabled in the actual pipeline here. We have to map our controllers. Now, a controller in ASP is the web interface that the front-end developers are going to be touching to get data from your backend. Okay, so there's that. We also have a weather forecast, which is just a basic template here. We also have as we mentioned, we have a controller. Here's our weather forecast controller. Okay, again, it's very simple. It's all very flat. It's not very friendly when it comes to expandability. We're going to fix that. Don't worry about that. But we just want to see what it is when we get what it is. It does use a few standards like enumerables right out of the box like this. There's nothing wrong with this, but I prefer better ways to do this because it's pushing back an array. Again, there's nothing wrong with this, but there is better ways to do this. I feel more standardized ways is probably a better way to put it. So there we go. And what we're going to do is we're not going to look at the rest of the files right now. Those are the big ones. We're actually going to run this. It might come up with a message asking if you want to accept the certificate, the self-signed certificate. If it does, just say yes, it's all good. But here we go. So basically, this creates a basic interface that will let us do a get statement. Now, a get statement is we have the 4 actions, CRUD for CRUD. Create, read, update, and delete. Now, this is a read action. Get is going to get all of the interfaces. We're going to try this now. We're going to execute, and it's going to come back with a bunch of different forecasts that it auto-generates on the fly. Now, we can then use this data in a format. You notice here it comes to us as a JSON format. Okay, that's something you need to know as well. All data that's passed around the web can be XML or JSON. Those are the 2 big web standards. XML was more of a Microsoft way of doing things, and JSON was more of a JavaScript way of doing things. JSON, though, has won because it's just a well-accepted language, as well as a lot of front ends are written in JavaScript languages such as React, Angular, and Vue. We can even look at the older languages like jQuery, etc., all JSON-based. So it's no doubt that that's the reason why that this is set up that way. Now, you'll notice that we also send back a code 200, for example. Now, there's lots of different codes out there. The ones we're going to be focusing on in this series are 200, which is everything's okay. 404, and I'm sure you've heard the expression 404, page not found. And that's exactly what it is. Now, it's been context into a web page not found, but 404 means whatever it is wasn't found. And we're going to use just straight vanilla 400 errors. And a 400 error could be pretty much anything. Now, there is some people who like to use 500 errors. I find that 500 errors are more for the server's thrown up and it's done something it shouldn't have, and it's going to throw some really bizarre error at us, and we should make note of those 500 errors. That's the reason why I don't like to use 500 errors. I prefer to use 400 errors or very specific 400 errors. But in this course, I'm going to stick straight to like just a 400 error, and that makes sense. You're going to see why this is so important. One of the biggest reasons why, though, to kind of give you a heads up on it, is it allows the front-end developer to very quickly ascertain whether they've either made a successful call or B, an unsuccessful call. For example, let's say the database goes down. It's going to generate a 400 error. It's going to say, oh, I can't find anything. Or it could be a 404 even. Can't find anything. And there's nothing there. or it could generate a 400 error saying you've just tried to create a record and there was an invalid field. The validation on it failed. You should have had, in our case, we're going to be creating books, and it needs to have a title, it needs to have an author. If you don't have both of those, it's going to throw a validation error. Later, you're going to see in the series. And we want to catch those things. But the thing I want you to remember from this particular lesson is that we are developing a very simple application right out of the box, and it's designed just to give us some weather forecasts. And it's using a CRUD read action, and it's always a get. Now, whenever you do the other actions, create is usually a post. And what happens is with a post, it's a little bit more of a heady command. A get is pretty simple. You usually have all your variables to what a get could be. Like, let's say you want to get an ID. Let's say you want to get the ID record of 1 or 2, and it's just going to put a /2 in the actual URL. So there's nothing in the body of the message is what I'm saying on the request. Whereas a post, you put all your data into the body, and it helps obscure it, hide it, and you don't see it on that URL, which is brilliant. Now, the next action, which is an update, would normally be a put. You're putting new data back where the old data was. And delete, of course, again, it's usually a delete command that you're using. And it's really good to use the different actions to distinguish what you are actually trying to do. Because if you try to make a get call to a post action on the server, it's going to come back and say, I don't know who you're trying to talk to here, because the action is part of the actual request. Okay, that's really important to remember. You'll see that. We'll actually test that in the future here. But you'll see that, when you want to make a request, and it's really great, especially when it comes to the delete. Now, delete could cause you to delete a record, and you want to make sure that that's exactly what they're trying to do. So you don't use a get to do a delete. You use a delete action to do a delete. So that helps to isolate those things. So I am kind of harboring on this a little bit, but it kind of gives you an idea what I'm getting at here. Okay, so this tutorial is going to kind of get cut right about here. Again, we've created the basic code. I'm going to create a URL in the actual description, which will have the link to the GitHub repository. Now, it's very possible that the repository will have a later version. You don't need to go get it from the repository. If you follow the steps that I have done right here, you're going to be where I'm at. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to be making multiple versions of this going forward. And there's a possibility you can do a clone of a version and pick up where you left off if you've had problems or errors in previous lessons. So that'll be available to you in the description. So hopefully that'll help. If you have any questions, please leave a message in the comments, and I'll be glad to answer your questions. Be sure to subscribe, because I'm going to be putting a lot of different bits and pieces in here to kind of teach all the API knowledge you're going to need. Now, again, get started. If you haven't built this project, go over this tutorial again and actually build the project, test it, make sure it runs for you. If you have any problems, lay them out, and we'll go from there. And I look forward to talking to you in the next tutorial. Frank Thomas here. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.